Go ahead.
Many people don't know that during World War II, Florida was one of only 2 states to experience any sort of fighting. Florida had a very unique World War II experience. Florida made a very large contribution to the war effort. As Floridians, I think it's important for all of us to know aspects of Florida's history so that we can gain perspective on the state we live in today. Since I've lived in Florida my entire life, I've taken many Florida history classes and done a lot of research on Florida through the years. Florida experienced World War II up close and personal through assisting in combat against the Germans right off our coastline, through supplying resources for military bases, and through supplying citrus. To begin with, I would like to discuss Florida's experience with combat during World War II. Florida experienced a lot more combat than many other states during the war. A lot of the combat was actually experienced right off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. 5 German U-boats, which are submarines, were sinking U.S. merchant vessels right off the coast. Many Florida civilians could look off the coast and see ships on fire in the middle of the ocean. Civilians with watercraft and aircraft would fly over the ocean or glide over the ocean and find these U-boats and help destroy them or help the army. U-boats were able to attack Florida easily because of Florida's coastline was so lit up with bars and headlights. Since the war took place primarily in Europe, most of the coast over there was completely black at night, and so Germans were having a heyday off the coast of Florida when the ships were so lit up. So every civilian was directly affected by the government's screen out. The screen out basically said that every light had to be covered up by a certain time each night. So even if Floridians didn't assist in combat, they were still affected because they had to cover up their home windows and their car headlights. Floridians also experienced a German invasion during the war. 4 German saboteurs landed off the coast of Ponte Verde Beach in the summer of 1942. They were part of a larger operation, and the other 4 landed in New York. All of them had lived in America at some point. The saboteurs were highly trained bombers, and their goal was to destroy American infrastructure. They marched through Miami, bought toothbrushes, got haircuts, and then went to the Jacksonville post office and asked for directions to the bus stop where they would then go to New York. In New York, they were turned in and were caught within 10 days. And even though this was unsuccessful for the Germans, it made Florida scared because it made them see like they're so exposed because of their coastline, and it made the war personal for Floridians. Now that I've described Florida's experience with combat during the war, I'm going to explain how the military took advantage of Florida's resources. One of the most drastic impacts of the war on Florida was the vast increase in military activity in Florida. During World War II, many branches of the military trained in Florida. According to Dr. Coles, Florida's strategic location made the state vital for national defense, and dozens of military installations were activated before and during the war. Planes and ships from Florida's bases helped protect the sea lanes in the Atlantic Ocean, Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean. Florida was viewed as an important first line of defense for the southern United States, the Caribbean Basin, and the Panama Canal. In Miami, thousands of troops trained. They trained on the beach and on the golf courses with working out and shooting and all the different aspects of the Army. The military actually bought luxury hotels right on the beach, so the troops would live in the hotels and they would train. During the Great Depression, a lot of tourists poured out of Florida, especially investors, and as all these people left, the military poured in. So Florida's economy was really helped during the war because of all the troops that were training there. By the end of World War II, 1/4 of all U.S. Army officers had served in Miami, and 1/5 of all Army troops in World War II had trained or served in Miami. A little closer to home, in Carabel, the U.S. took advantage of Florida's coastline. All aspects of amphibious training were trained at Carabel. Actually, the military would come to Tallahassee on the weekends because Carabel is like an hour and a half outside of Tallahassee, and there was a train track built between Carabel and Tallahassee just for these soldiers. Unfortunately for them, Leon County had a dry law at the time, so they were mad about that. They couldn't come here and drink, but they came here and did other things. The third and final military installation I'm going to talk about is Eglin Air Force Base. Shortly after the United States entered World War II, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle was assigned to train 16 bomber companies. Doolittle was put in charge of training all these men at Eglin Airfields. The National Museum of the Air Force website describes the training that occurred. Troops learned how to take off within 300 feet, the available distance on the carrier USS Hornet. The crews also practiced cross-country and night flying, navigating without radio references or landmarks, low-level bombing, and aerial gunnery. They completed their training in mid-March and later flew to San Francisco to board the carrier. Eglin Air Force Base was a really good base to have because it was right near the coast, and these bombers would be bombing Japan off a carrier. And so that's only 30 feet of a runway, and so they were able to practice this really short taking off and then go over the ocean and practice all sorts of things that they would have to know for the campaign. The raid actually happened on April 18, 1942. It took off from the USS Hornet and bombed Japan and then landed in friendly China. Eglin Air Force Base is 2.5 hours east of Tallahassee. In addition to the 3 military bases I discussed, there are many more military installations. Dr. Coles points out by 1943, approximately 172 military installations of various sizes were in existence in Florida compared to only 8 in 1940. Florida was a major resource to military training throughout the war. Florida helped out by having the military there, and the military helped Florida out because it helped with our economy. For my final point, I'm going to discuss Florida's agriculture during the war. Primary economic contribution during the whole war was agriculture. With the new technology to produce concentrate, Florida's citrus production boomed. Actually, Florida provided all of the United Kingdom's vitamin C during the war. Concentrate was basically 1 freight car of concentrate equaled 30 cars of whole fruit. So because farmers were willing to turn their crop into concentrate, they were able to export a lot more citrus. In his article, Ben F. Rogers describes the citrus production in Florida during the war. There were several reasons for the rapid increase of citrus production in Florida. Again, in most cases, coming back to adaptability. Floridians were willing to adapt to help with the war effort, and farmers were willing to adjust their crop of choice to produce citrus so that they could help with the war effort. And because Floridians were so willing to adapt, our state made one of the largest contributions to the war. In conclusion, Florida had a very unique World War II experience. As you can see, Florida was willing to make many different adjustments to help with the United States war effort. Florida contributed to the war by assisting in combat, by allowing military bases to train there, and by making citrus concentrate to send to Europe. I don't know about you, but it's aspects of history like this that make me proud to be a Floridian.